This is a audio recording to go with the presentation I made at the International Conference Centre in Birmingham on Monday 18th of March 2019 to present on beyond the initial data transformation at Lincoln College. To introduce myself, my name is Graham Harrison. I'm the Group Director of Information Services, IT and Projects at Lincoln College, and I want to talk about the transformation that we undertook to completely overhaul our MIS capability and to look back at that, to evaluate its effectiveness and to recap and review what's happened since, and to think about how we might continue to develop this transformation in the future. So to start with, I'd like to review some of the Ofsted comments which we received in our Ofsted report specific to the management information systems 2 inspections ago when Ofsted were with us back in July 2016. So they were heavily critical of the management information capability that we had in place at the time. So they said things like the provider needs to extend the range, quality and availability of the MIS, that managers weren't able to monitor programs specifically because of MI. Managers do not receive sufficient, appropriate and timely management information, and heads of school can't view the reports that they need to look at learners' progress and work experience. So that was very specific to the MIS, heavily critical, and we recognised the part that the state back then of the MIS, the management information systems, played in the requires improvement overall grade that we got at the time. So we put a project together and we gave it a mandate, and in summary, the mandate for that project was to fundamentally improve the quality of our management information, enabling better informed decision making and significantly leaner and more efficient processes and systems. So on one page here, I'm going to summarize 4 months of analysis work and condense it all down into one diagram. So we put a dedicated team of cross-functional people together to really understand what the customers were telling us needed to be improved. And at the end of that analysis, we could break this down into 6 key headings. So we quickly established the effect, which is MIS services are inconsistent, ineffective, and are not aligned with organisational needs and customer expectation. And we found 6 main things that were causing that effect. So the first thing that we identified was disconnected systems and data. So at the time, we had an awful lot of separate systems that weren't very well connected and integrated. So we had an MIS system from one provider, and we had the ProMonitor system from another, we had the CRM system from another provider, and the data was very poorly integrated and often didn't agree, and there were different versions of the same piece of data that didn't match. So data quality was another one. We had different people producing different versions of the same piece of data. We had people wandering into meetings with locally produced data on spreadsheets, and within meetings there'd be disagreement about what data to use and how accurate the data was. So we had raw data versus processed information. That was a finding of the analysis, a feeling amongst the customer base that the data that was produced by the information services team, it wasn't formatted, it wasn't analysed, it wasn't organised, interpreted, or presented. It was just a whole host of detailed spreadsheet data that the people receiving it could not interpret and couldn't use to make management decisions. So the people aspect is the finding that our core information services team lack both the capacity and the capability to deliver against these customer perceptions and expectations. And in establishing that as a conclusion, we went out and studied other MIS departments, similar sized colleges, and we benchmarked our numbers of people and the amount we were spending on payroll and training, and we were able to demonstrate that we weren't investing. So the MIS reporting is another box. We literally had hundreds, and in some cases thousands, of different reports on the system with similar names doing similar things, and when customers went to access those reports, they could never tell which one to use, and invariably different but similar reports produced slightly different numbers, which again compounded the issue with people walking into meetings with pieces of data that never agreed. So data dashboards is the last one. We recognized in the analysis that we didn't use data dashboards. We didn't really know at the time what a data dashboard was, but we did recognize that other colleges in our region were using these tools, and in fact we were the only regional college not using them. Once the analysis phase was over, we went into an implementation of a transformational change, and it focused on three key areas: the technology, the processes, and the people. On the technology front, we had recognized that our MIS systems had got to the stage where it really needed replacing, and the various links and exports between the systems will lead into a lot of those issues that I spoke about on the last slide, and we had no data consistency, no data accuracy. So we set up a team to look at the various systems that were out there on the market, and we identified through that process that if the objective is to bring lots of different systems together and to deliver the most coverage with the least amount of vendors, then the Pro solution was the best fit as far as that aspect was concerned. So the diagram in the bottom left hand corner is an indication of all the modules that are available within the Pro suite, and as part of our technology replacement, we took every single one of those modules and we replaced all of the existing systems we had that did the various bits of this before, so that everything came together, one integrated system, one integrated database. So we took the whole lot. We took Pro Resource to do our curriculum planning, Pro Engage replaced the incumbent CRM system, Pro Monitor and Pro Achieve you already had, but they weren't very well integrated before. Pro Solution replaced the incumbent student record system, and we took Pro SAR, we took Pro Observe, Pro Verify to integrate all those aspects of the curriculum management. We already had Pro Portal, but we started making more of it. And Pro Metrics is the dashboard system that runs straight through the middle of all those other systems. So when we do have the data in one database and we have one version of the numbers, we would be able to project those onto dashboards that were published on the intranet that every single member of staff could look at. So that was the technology transformation. Down in the bottom right hand corner, that represents the main processes which we overhauled at the time we went live. So the ILR process, obviously, because if you put in a new student record system in, that will have its own way of collecting, verifying, fixing the errors and submitting the ILR, but also core processes around creating and managing registers, timetabling. All of the reports all those thousands of reports were got rid of. We started again from scratch because the thousands we had were far too messy to resolve. We replaced all the dashboarding, the lesson observations, the existing Word documentation implementation of lesson obs went. The SAR went from Word into Pro SAR. The verification went into Pro Verify. Our applications became electronic, and our CRM processes. So all those processes were completely redesigned and re-implemented during the transformation project. And in the top right hand corner, we've got the structure that we came up with for the information services team. So before there were two less posts, and it was very flat. There was the head of IS, there was one team leader and all of the staff reported into that team leader in a very flat structure. We split it up into a CIS operations team that looks after the ILR and supports the users and looks after curriculum setup and curriculum planning. And we set up a CIS development team that gets involved in creating reports and dashboards and implementing new processes and effectively doing an integration management job when any new features are released as part of the Pro Suite. And in combination, those three aspects, the technology, the process and the people, are conceptually looking at what we actually delivered during the transformation. On this slide, I thought I would just put together an overview of the timeline in terms of every aspect of the project. There was 2 years in between the first Ofsted visit and the second Ofsted visit, and the transformation, the analysis and the implementation, and then bedding the change down, and then realizing the benefits, all had to happen for us between the 2 inspections in order for it to have been effective. We essentially knew with some certainty when Ofsted would be back, and that set the timeline for us. We knew we had to implement all those changes to address the specific critical feedback that we got in the original 2016 report. And in actual fact, when I last presented to Advanced World exactly 1 year ago, it was the day before Ofsted would due back in to re-inspect us, and we all held our breath from the perspective of the quality and the delivery in terms of wanting the overall grades to improve, and also from reading the report to see if we had managed to address the MIS criticisms that were received in the previous visit. Ofsted came back to visitors in the early March, and we had the draft version of the report by the end of April, and we did get the result we were looking for overall, because the overall grade went from requires improvement to good, which is very important for us as a college. A second requires improvement grade would have been very serious in terms of having failed to have learned from the outcomes of the previous one and have implemented the changes. So some of the specific comments about the management information, we had a comment that leaders have introduced accurate and accessible management information, and that as a result we could monitor learners' progress and take steps to intervene. We had comments that senior leaders set a clear priority to improve outcomes, and they did this through partly through improving the availability and use of accurate management information. They also mentioned that managers now have access to a range of effective management information, and that they use this information well. So we did get the results in the Ofsted inspection we were looking at, and we also, over that academic period and the academic cycle since, we have improved overall achievement at the college by 10.3% over 2 academic cycles. So that's a good measure, and the MIS has played its part in contributing to this. It enables us to effectively measure, monitor, manage and control the work of staff and students, and to evaluate effectiveness and to intervene early. So with all those things in place, with all that success, did that mean, as far as the management information systems change were concerned, that it was job done? In starting to explore and answer that question, I would like to take a look at what, in my view, are the key components of an integrated data and management information strategy, because I believe that we've done some of these at this point last year after the successful Ofsted visit, but not all of them. So just having a look through them, one of the main components of a integrated data strategy is to have integrated systems and data. That thing about taking systems that are implemented using different solutions, different providers, different software packages with bits of data that are maybe integrating through imports and exports, and Excel spreadsheets. My view is that that can't be a successful foundation stone for a successful data strategy, and therefore properly integrated systems and data is a key aspect. So we still have got a way to go with that. We've done a lot of integration and bringing systems together, but we still need to look at our finance, our HR, our payroll, and our employer provision, which are all still loosely integrated and need further work. So for me, visualization of data is a key plank of a data strategy. So we use Prometrics, which is the advanced data dashboarding tool, and there are tools out there in the market like Dynamics, for example, that have a very advanced user interface, and their graphs and charts look very nice indeed. But the issue for me is that Prometrics is already integrated with the databases that underpin the rest of the modules, and it comes with some out-of-the-box graphs and charts to get you going. But it's the integrated nature which is the key thing. So dashboards built in Prometrics are typically quite quick and easy to build. They don't require any software development, they just require data analysis skills, and this maximizes the skill sets of the management information services team. So cultural change is another key plank of data strategy. For me, this means that data-driven decision making just becomes the way we do things around here. That's one definition of culture, and the stories that build up about data and information are positive ones. So at our college, for example, before the transformation, it was common for people to come into meetings waving spreadsheets with their own data and contesting the data that had been produced by the central team. And after the transformation, we don't allow that. And if anybody comes into a meeting with their own spreadsheet or their own local data, they're politely asked to go away and put the effort into making the central data correct, and to come back when that is done. We simply don't allow, and that culture is driven right from the most senior post holders. We simply don't allow lots of people bringing their own copies of data into meetings. So something I'm going to cover in a lot of detail in the rest of the presentation is OODA loops, the observe, orientate, decide, act loop. So I'll not go into the detail here because there are lots more slides on it. Cross-verification of data sources for me is very important. So if you're going to put a dashboard together on attendance, you want the bar chart of late registers on the same page as the attendance data, because those two data sources verify each other. If you've got large numbers of late registers, then your attendance data is likely to be inaccurate. And if you really think about the data like that, it's almost always the case that with one set of data, there's another piece of data that will help to verify it and validate it. And so putting those data sources close together and using that to drive the verification and validation of data actually helps to drive up its quality. So the last point, I'm a very big believer in using these things as a way of deriving meaning and value from data. So in my view, a number on its own doesn't tell you anything. So if you knew that attendance was a particular percentage, it wouldn't actually tell you anything about whether that was good, bad, or indifferent. And in my experience, there are three things, one of three things we have to do to a piece of data to drive meaning from it, and that's either benchmark it, trend it, or rank it. It's one of those three things, and I've tried to find others to add to it, but effectively other things I've come across are just a form of one of those three. So in order to drive meaning from any set of data, any piece of data, I would look to benchmark it, trend it, or rank it in order to derive meaning that would then enable us to go into a mode of data-driven decision making based on having derived the meaning and understanding from that data. So I'll pop this slide in order to explore in a bit of detail why our data and MIS transformation was successful, because I do believe it was successful. Although we've got a long way to go, there's lots more we can do, and we can always drive more value from it. Why was it that we managed to deliver this change, such a big change, in a relatively short span of time, and to deliver it successfully? And I think this model, Kotter's 8-stage change framework, helps to describe how that happened. So we did get a real mauling in the Ofsted comments in 2016, specific to the MIS. And my belief is that feedback and the very clear guidance from Ofsted that it had to improve gave us our step one. It established a sense of urgency. And in my experience in further education, there's nothing like an Ofsted inspection to give a college a sense of urgency, either when we're anticipating that it's happening, or between the one we just had and the one that we know we're going to have, and especially if we've had requires improvement. So at that base level, everybody had the urgency they needed to be successful. Step two, create the guiding coalition. So we put a team together called a STEP team to investigate, to do the analysis and deliver the transformation. And we pulled those staff off their day jobs. We gave them time to do the work. We wrote a clear mandate. We had a senior responsible own the panel of very senior post holders. The CEO was behind it and supported it. So we very clearly had that guiding coalition to deliver the change. And the next step, step three, we also had a very clear vision. So the cause and effect diagram that we put on a previous slide, we knew where we wanted to get and broadly how we wanted to get there. So I'll not carry on going through every one, because I think my view is that as you go up through the steps, they are important, but they're less important in my view than the ones below. But for me, steps 1 to 3 certainly help to explain why our change was successful. Now, one of the things that in my view Kotter's framework isn't so good at is he's very good at looking back at changes that have happened and explaining why they were a success. It's not quite as good to take that and to apply it in the future to changes that we want to be a success. But it does tell us that those three things, the sense of urgency, the guiding coalition, and having a clear and compelling mission and vision are very important, and in fact critical in order to achieving success in any major transformation. On this slide, I've represented my view of the scale of successive iterations of transformation and how that scale decreases. So our first transformation at Lincoln College was an enormous change where we overhauled completely the management structures in the curriculum teams, and that was an enormous cross-organizational transformational change. And in the second transformation iteration, that was slightly smaller than the first, and it's in that iteration where we replaced all of the management information systems. In the third transformation, we had some secondary phases to the MIS change. In the fourth transformation, we introduced a small amount of functionality, and it seems to follow the graph, which is a graph taken from economics, which shows the law of diminishing returns in terms of reducing marginal price and an increasing marginal cost. And it's been my observation that transformation scales of transformation reduce in the same way. So there is a little conundrum in here to solve for me, which is that the scale of the transformations will get smaller, the investment will get smaller. So how do we continue to drive an increase in value from the MIS systems when those associated resources are going to diminish? And it can be done, in my view, and one of those ways is the continued and rigorous application of the OODA loop, the Observe, Orientate, Decide, Act framework, which I'm going to move on to and talk through. So here we have one of our dashboards. We have a dashboard on attendance, and it's got a breakdown by whole college, and it's got a breakdown by English and Maths, and there's some of the charts that are doing some of the cross-verifying stuff. But essentially, we know that the whole college attendance is 84.7%, and just reading that off a page of online data dashboards, is that a good number? Is it a bad number? Well, in my view, we can't tell without doing some benchmarking or trending or ranking. So we're going to go around the OODA loop and see how that works in practice and see what sense we can make of it. So here we have the OODA loop in action, and we're very big on this. It's not just a conceptual framework, a management speak that we get involved in at Lincoln College. It's very much something that we do enact and we do in practice. So as we go around the loop, actually the orientate would be better called analyze. That's the stage where you analyze the information you've got and orientate yourself. So starting at the top, we've observed from that dashboard that attendance is 84.7%, for English and Maths it's 75.8%. We observed very high punctuality. So on to the orientate, the analyze. So we'll have a look at that data, and so what is it telling us? And we can't be sure really, because there's not a lot of data there to go on. And at the decide, between the analyze and decide, my decision was that I couldn't really be sure what it was telling us because we didn't have enough data. We weren't capturing all the data. So at the act stage, what are we to do about it? The action was to capture historic data for late registers, to see what that's telling us, and then go back to the start and go round the OODA loop again. And it's this continuous iteration around observe, analyze, decide, and act, which drives the value and helps to make some meaning and understanding from the data that we've observed. So here we have a graph which is gone back to get more data. It's done this by trending the missing registers by our directorates, by our top level areas at the college, to see how that's progressing. Is it improving? Is it getting worse? How is it likely to be impacting on that attendance number? And what we see is that generally the missing registers are trending downwards, but there's a particular school which worryingly it consistently trends above all of the others. So that will be part of my next observation. So this is the same data that sits just behind that 84.7% on the dashboard, and it's available with one click on the main bar graph. And this time I've decided to rank it to see what that is telling me. And I've ranked it by lead areas. Now our lead areas won't mean a lot to other colleges, but the EP-Eng is employer provision apprenticeships, part is performing arts, etc. So I've ranked it by my areas to see what that is telling me, and I can see that this data starting to yield up some of its narrative. So I have got a low number of areas where the majority of the lateness of registers is clustered, and that's interesting. And also the bottom graph is a ranking of so I've got a count of missing registers, but exactly how late are they? And that again is telling me that there's severe lateness clustered within a small number of our lead areas, where the rest of the lead areas, in actual fact, they're only 1 or 2 days behind, and we don't want them to be behind at all. But it's starting to give us a pattern that will help us to make sense of that attendance number. We're going to go round our OODA loop again on a second iteration. So at the top of the observe, I've reviewed the graphs and charts and just one level of data further on the previous 2 slides. So when I get to orientate stroke analyze, what is that telling me? Well, the count of missing registers does seem high, and the average lateness seems high for some areas. That's the analysis I take on it. So the decision I make at this point is that I need to improve the missing and late registers numbers before I can really derive accuracy out of the attendance number, which will give me the truth of what's going on. So the action in this particular iteration around the OODA loop was we provided very clear directed instructions to the lead areas, which we'd highlighted through the ranking that had high instances of late registers, either high numbers or very late. So we provided those instructions. We gave the lead areas a deadline by which their registers would be resolved, and then got ready to go around the OODA loop a third time. On our third iteration around the OODA loop, we've re-observed the attendance for vocational English and Maths now that we know we've got a handle on the late registers problem, which could have prevented it from being accurate and meaningful. And the numbers did look reasonable at this stage, but we're not really benchmarking, ranking, or trending that number. So we're not able to take a lot of meaning out of it. That was my analysis on this trip around the OODA loop. So the decision was we need to benchmark the attendance data against previous years. So we've actually got a way of telling whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. The action then was to extract the data from the dashboard again for the previous year, which is very easy to do because the criteria on the dashboard can be changed, so we can get exactly the same graph for the last year and the year before. And that my action would then be to break that down by area, to make the view of that very graphical, so that I could tell what was going on, and anyone analysing the data could tell what was going on. This time around, we're getting some very insightful and meaningful data that enables us to interpret the overall 84.7%. So we can tell by looking at the whole college that in every single month, given that we were doing this in early December, the attendance in the academic 2018-19 is markedly lower than the attendance in the previous academic year for the same month. And by breaking it out and benchmarking it across whole college and then each of the main directorates and schools, we can tell that this picture is universal. So in every single school, in every area, and when we aggregate it up to the top level, we have lower attendance than we had last year, and it is considerably lower as well. So this insight has been made possible by applying the OODA loop in a number of iterations, and if we hadn't applied that framework and that approach, we might have looked at 84.7% and thought, well, that doesn't sound too bad, and never really got to the bottom of the insight, because at this stage with these graphs and charts, we can tell with certainty that we do have something going on at our college which is dragging attendance down, and we want to know why it's lower this year than the year before and do something about it. This last iteration around the OODA loop that I'm going to do in the slides, because there are further iterations, but this is the last one to make the point. This is where it got really interesting for me. So the observe was from the graphs on the previous page. We can observe that attendance is down whole college in every single benchmark month, and we get the same pattern in every benchmarked month for the areas, for the schools and the directorates. That's my observation. So my orientation, my analysis is what has changed between the two academic years. And one of the obvious things that we spotted that had changed is that we stood down between the two academic years a small team that was dedicated to attendance monitoring, and we replaced them by embedding the monitoring of attendance within the progress coaches around the college. That's something that very definitely changed. We also analysed that we were approaching the Christmas period, which is a historical drop off in retention, and that there is a link between attendance and retention. So we're analysing that potentially this problem could compound if we don't act. So we also observed, although the initial observation looked okay, the conclusion is there is a definite attendance issue that we need to be resolving. So at the decision stage, we decided that we need to support learners who might be wavering. You know, if they're starting to have poor attendance and are approaching the Christmas period, we don't want to lose them, we want to support them. We decided that we were going to contact learners who are absent, individually contact learners who are absent, try and influence the absence. We decided that we had a need to improve the absence reporting process, which had dropped off because it took several iterations around the OODA loop to spot that we had an attendance problem, and to proactively contact learners with unauthorized absence. So those were our decisions. And at the action stage, we set up an attendance monitoring group to oversee the implementation of these changes. We created a capability within ProSolution, exclusively using ProSolution functionality. We didn't need anything extra to do this, to send automated text messages to absent learners in order to highlight, in actual fact, to learners and their parents, to highlight their absence and to help them to be accountable for it. We sent certificates for non-regulated qualifications to learners in the run up to Christmas, to help them to feel that they were achieving and there was something worth coming back for after Christmas. We sent out to all learners postcards on information and getting support with finance, exams, choice of course, mental health. We created a ready for work course so that learners who had decided their vocational course just wasn't for them, we could transfer them onto a ready for work course instead of losing them. We could embed them, give them work placement within the college. We could give them some learning and prepare them to transfer out of that onto apprenticeships rather than just losing them. We explicitly contacted all learners who did not return after the Christmas break. We added absence reporting to our student smartphone app, and I've got a slide to show how that worked in a little while. And we added direct reporting of authorized absence into the app as well. In actual fact, this last stage is still ongoing. So we did replace the process whereby learners informed us of an authorized absence. We made it slicker through text messaging and giving them one number to call. But what we want to do is have a page in the smartphone app so they can just authorize their absence from there and take out all the touch points in the process. So this was a really interesting iteration around the OODA loop, and it gave us a whole set of actions which we implemented in order to address the definite attendance issue that had been identified. Just a quick look then at whether we actually had any impact. So the graph in the top left-hand corner is an index of unauthorized absences which we were logging, and we could see that they were all increasing in the run-up to week 21. We can see where the automated text messages were introduced, and we still have an issue within apprenticeships. We haven't bottomed, but within 16 to 19s and tutorials, we saw a marked drop in unauthorized absences directly after the introduction of the text messages, and I've got more recent versions of this graph, and I can see that trend has continued. And also the benchmark in the graph in the bottom right hand corner, the gap between this year and last year was going up and up and up through the months into December, and after we released this package of measures, the difference between 18-19 and 17-18, there's still a difference, but the difference is coming down. So the measures we got, the observed from our next round, are telling us that the measures that we implemented are having an impact. This slide is showing our student smartphone app, which was launched this year, and we've integrated and embedded it with some aspects of the Pro Suite. So you can see in the picture on the left-hand side a linked timetable and calendar, and by clicking on that tile, learners can get their live timetables, which is lifted straight out of the Pro Suite. There's a data extract done every night, so it's just a few hours out of date from being live, and if there are any timetable changes that were made up to the day before, then that's all live, and the feedback, the graphic in the bottom right hand corner is all the analytics of how the student smartphone app is being used, and the feedback is that the timetable feature is been really well received and students use it a lot. The other aspect, which is integrated with the Pro Suite, in the middle screenshot, the dark green attendance, because this was my app, so I've got 0% attendance. But if I was a student, I'd see my live attendance figure in there, and if you click on that tile, you get graphs and data that break the attendance down. So the live timetables and the attendance are two features that have been very useful. And it hasn't been difficult to integrate the app with Pro Solution. We haven't needed to write any code. There's been no software development. We have had to do some data extracts, and we've had to work with the provider of the app to get those to work. But it hasn't been particularly painful to put that together. The text messages using Pro Suite have really improved the direct reporting of student authorized absence, and we're hoping to build a link in to this app next, so that students can get a direct link to Pro Portal and report their absences, which will immediately update all the registers for that day. But we're not quite there with that at the moment. So the app is supplied to us. We've been working with Collabco, whose product is MyDay. The graphic in the top right hand corner is just showing the default landing page when a learner opens a browser on any one of the college computers, just to show that if students haven't got a smartphone, we're not discriminating against students that haven't got their own smartphone, because exactly the same data is available from any computer within the college. I'd like to conclude by having a look at what comes next, and just evaluating where we can take the maturity of our MIS from here, because I do believe there's a lot more that we can do. So the target picture in the middle at the bottom is my view of how the capabilities of further education college MIS teams builds up. So in the middle, every college in the land has the capability to generate an ILR to get its funding and report on its funding. So everybody does that bit. It's a really complex specialist technical area, and we all employ technical experts to do that for us. And it's not to belittle the complexity or the impact of it, because it is both of those things. But in my view, colleges using their MIS to produce their funding has become a hygiene factor. That's to say that it's just expected that every college will be able to run MIS to generate funding, generate the ILR. So that is the middle, the centerpiece of how FE College MIS is layered, in my view. If we go to the next circle, reports and dashboards seem fairly straightforward and fairly obvious, but not all colleges are doing that bit well. Some colleges, like we, used to have thousands of reports, so they all contradicted each other. And dashboards, we didn't used to have one. And even colleges that have got dashboards, is everyone using them? Are they culturally accepted? Do people need more support? So as we move into this second circle, there are less colleges doing it and less colleges doing it well. And when we get into the outer circle, data science and predictive analytics, there's only one college that I know of doing this, and we aren't doing it. We haven't got there yet. And to illustrate what that is, I'm working with a local data science company who've done a piece of work with a local company who deliver country fairs, and it's big business. They're huge, and this company had 3 country fairs around the UK, and they wanted to know where to open their 4th. They employed this data science company who took their own data from inside their systems. They also got hold of all kinds of publicly available data on populations and incomes and demographics and gender splits and splits by all kinds of axes, and overlaid that publicly available data with their internal data on the customers of their existing shows. And that exercise led to a recommendation of a location to open the next fair, the 4th fair, which was actually contrary to the intuitive choice of the management. So to cut through that story, the company picked the site that the data had highlighted as being the likely one to succeed. And a year later, that fair is very successful. And I think we should be doing something very similar with recruitment data. We know we didn't manage to hit our recruitment growth targets this year, and we can look in with all the data on the inquiries and the enrolments and the applications. What we can't do is layer that data on top of publicly available data about potential learners to fathom out how we should be directing our marketing and recruitment efforts to achieve our growth targets this year. That is the provision, that is the area of data science and predictive analytics, and that is where I would like to take our capability next. And the graphic in the top right hand corner is an indication of maturity in this field. So in the bottom left hand corner is data. This is where we were. We had raw data, we had lots of spreadsheets. It wasn't very graphical, it wasn't cross-verifying, but we had a lot of data. And if you process that data using dashboards and OODA loops and all those techniques, you start to move from data into information, you start to touch into intelligence. But if you can apply data science and predictive analytics, you're moving all the way up that chain to top right hand corner, where you've transformed your data into knowledge that you can use to drive management actions. So over the next 3 years, my aim is to document and implement an integrated strategy, which we've started. We've made good strides. There's lots more we can do. I'd like further consolidation and centralization of all our different systems. So HR is still separate, finance is still separate, apprenticeships is still separate, and that goes against my rule of having integrated systems and data. I'd like to do lots more with OODA loops. So I'd like OODA loops to become commonplace for everyone that uses our data and our dashboards. I would like to better support and empower our staff and work out what they need in order to be doing some of this stuff routinely out in the curriculum. I would love to be able to combine internal data with external data to provide data science and predictive analytics, and I'm working and getting a trial project off the ground now. Much more integration with the student smartphone app. The absence reporting is just the first, but I really believe that is the channel by which we effectively connect learners with their data. And I want to revisit the team structure of our core MIS team, because I think we're still quite lean in terms of capacity. And if we get involved in a predictive analytics or a data science project, I'd like to put people from our teams on that project so they can learn how to do it, and we can bring that expertise back in-house. That's the end of the presentation. That's effectively the talk that I gave at the Advanced World Conference a couple of weeks ago, and this is a stage where we reached where the audience sitting with lots of really interesting questions and debate. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions. So if you'd like to email me gharrison@lincolncollege.ac.uk. Also, maybe worth mentioning that I'm currently studying for an MBA, and I'm tying my research into data and information management strategy. So if you'd like to get in touch, maybe I can tie some of that research in and maybe look to help some FE colleges. And if you need to gain senior buy-in, if that's a challenge, and if you need to structure something around the strategy and the benefits and the timelines, or anything around transformation or implementing OODA loops and delivering cultural change, that there's potential there for me to link some of that to the research. So thank you very much for listening, and if you'd like to get in touch, I'll be very happy to talk on any of these subjects.